Please.
Okay, so we are currently live.
Cool.
So, hi everyone watching. My name is Greg. Welcome to this panel. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank all of the authors for being here. Where if you're okay with it, we can just jump right into the questions. Yeah. Okay. So the first one is pretty simple. Can you each briefly introduce yourselves and share your motivations? Sorry, your motives for writing about masculinity regarding queer boys. We can jump on in. Anyone? Also, Adib, I think you're muted.
Julian, why don't you go first?
Sad face. Oh gosh. Okay. Well, hi, hello everyone. I am Julian Winters, young adult author of contemporary novels. Several of them, including Running with Lions, Right Where I Left You. What's the new one called again? Oh, As You Walk On By. That's the one. And then what was the other question? Why? What motivates me to write about writing masculinity? I think just writing about queer boys in general is my motivation, and getting to show that there is no one right or wrong way to be queer. There's no right or wrong way to be a queer boy, especially in today's world. And so I love to explore the different ways that exists, and also how do we in different communities look at things like masculinity and representation, and kind of defying those rules that have always been put in place, like this is how you have to be in order to exist. That's what I love to write about.
Can you all hear me now?
Oh my gosh.
Okay, why didn't someone say something sooner? I was giving great humor earlier and no one was responding, and I thought I was just falling flat. I didn't know what was happening.
I thought it was a glitch.
Homophobia.
I only look at myself, so I didn't even notice that your mouth was moving. So
Oh my god.
Wow.
we all do it.
I actually always hide my self-view as I find my beauty too distracting. What's his face? Hyacinthus staring into the waters.
Already fallen into chaos.
Are you gonna answer the question?
No,
the answer to the question is obvious. I'm vain and I write about people like me, going through things like me. No. Oh, the blue screen is doing some weird things to my mouth. That's terrible. I'll fix it after that. I think partly I write it because it's something I think about a lot as I navigate the world, as I evaluate my safety in any space that I'm in, as I wonder how I can make the world better for the people that are growing up today. Also, it's the life I've lived, and sometimes I'm just sort of self-therapizing on the page. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a pretty similar answer. So I only have the one book out. This Is Why They Hate Us. Julian very kindly has a copy behind him, which I appreciate. Thank you. I should have gotten your guys' books too, because I have them. But yeah, no, like that book is like, I wrote it totally for my 17-year-old self, and my 17-year-old self was a boy who didn't really know how to exist. Especially because, it's about I'm bisexual and so is Kike. And so it sort of was like, I would have a model, but they were straight, or I'd have a model like in my head of someone to be, and then they'd be gay. And it didn't always fit. So I was like, okay, like if I can make that for a 17-year-old bi kid who can be like, okay, I'm going to try and be like this, or not emulate Kike because he's kind of chaotic and a lot of weird stuff happens. But, just like to know, like to trust yourself and to try and make your own sort of way in the world. But yeah, I didn't set out to write about masculinity. It's just that, like, as a man writing a boy, it, manifested how I wanted it to.
I mean, some of the best works were accidental, so you know what? We're just gonna run with it. So the second question is: in your respective books, how do you approach the concept of masculinity through the queer lens?
Well, I think it's bold of you to assume that I know what I'm doing, because I don't. I always write by the seat of my pants. And
You
I
really
think I know it's true. Julian has seen my process and he's like, Adib, how? And you just You just send it to your editor afterwards? You don't look at it? And I'm like, of course I don't look at my own writing. I'm too busy staring in the mirror. I think for me, theme is one of those things that I only understand after I've already done it. And so it's only when I reach the end and go back and look at my work that I realize, oh, I'm writing about masculinity. And so I think because it's something that I live with and that, as I said, I'm constantly negotiating, it just bleeds through into my work pretty regularly. And having been like called on it and being like, having people say, why do you keep writing about this? I'm like, I don't know, but I guess I'm going to keep doing it because now I'm in my own head about it. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see if I continue down this path or not.
For me, like I think queer masculinity is it's a lot more expansive. Am I echoing? I think I'm echoing on someone.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, better now. Okay, cool. I think queer masculinity is a lot more expansive than obviously like straight masculinity, because I think there's more of a spectrum, and it's not even a spectrum. It's like just so 4D in a way. Because there are queer men who are like very traditionally masculine, and they like sports and beer, and like they like, and as long as they're not ragging on someone for being more feminine or having more traditionally gay interests, and like that's totally fine. But there are like all these types of people, and I think trying to go, if it is a spectrum, like trying to go to either pole, like being really masculine or some other way that doesn't feel natural, then I think like that's where we sort of fall into stereotyping and trying to force people into boxes they're not comfortable with. And so like I just remember like I was straight in high school, and I was always trying to force myself to be a certain way, and there are things you just can't do that you can't do, because your friends would make fun of you for it. And so I think like, yeah, with queer masculinity, it's like, oh, I can do what I want, and because I'm queer, it is queer. And so it's having just like your natural interests, and yeah. So I think in the book I was just like, okay, I'm going to make Kike a lot like me, but different enough that I can sort of say it's not me espousing all these beliefs. But yeah, he was just sort of, he just was. And I think that's the best thing you can do as a writer, is to just have a character who unless you're like, I'm thinking about like Camp by Elsie Rosen, and how like in that book there's a specific reason why the main character is trying to be very masculine, and like it's making a point. But I think when like with me just writing contemporary, it's like, okay, I'm going to have a like 3D character, and I'm going to want them to just have the interests that come up to me as I'm writing, without trying to fit them into sort of a larger narrative. It's like individual.
I think it's funny because I am an extreme plotter. Like I do these detailed outlines. This is what I'm going to discuss. These are the themes I want to do and everything. And then when I get to writing the book, when I'm like having conversations between characters, all of a sudden things just happen on the page where I'm like, oh, I didn't intend to go there. But now that I'm here, let's go ahead and openly discuss this. So I think, especially like with As You Walk On By, there is a lot of discussion about what is an okay or an acceptable definition of masculine, especially with the main character being an athlete, the main character being Black. I just accidentally stumbled into this conversation where I was like, wow, I really need to look at how do we talk about masculinity, especially within like different communities, especially for people of color, where it's like, you can be, a white celebrity, and you can do things that may be traditionally, and I say that very loosely, seen as feminine, or things that kind of, toe the line of borders and everything. And it's like it's celebrated. It's like, oh my gosh, this person's so iconic. This person's so wonderful. It's so cool that they're doing this, and they're so brave. But the second a person of color does something like this, it's like, oh, they're too feminine. They're too much of this kind of queer person. And it's all usually in a negative context. And I was like, well, I would really like to like discuss this, because I think it's really a lot of how society is, where it is if you're a person of color, you have to, meet certain standards in order for you to be, this trendsetter, this amazing person, this acceptable version of a human. While if you're white, you get to do so many different things. So I did not intend to talk about those things, and as you walk on by, but as I was writing, I was like, oh gosh, this is opening a box that obviously is inside of me that I am scared to talk about. So why not be bold and just put it out there on the page for everybody to read about? And that's usually how it happens for me. Is I don't go in a lot of times with these intentions of talking about masculinity and different aspects of queer life. I just want incidentally queer characters on page most of the time. But these things need to be discussed, and I'm glad that I did, because it really forced me to start looking at some of the ways that I look at things like masculinity and what's acceptable, and how to be a queer person in this world. And yeah, it was important to me.
Okay, honestly, those are some great answers, and they even lead into the third question, which is how do you challenge or expand traditional notions of masculinity within your writing? Not all at once, please.
All right, 1, 2, 3, nose goes.
I know. I like how we're pretending we didn't see the questions beforehand.
Right. See, sometimes you just have to put someone in the hot seat. That's my suggestion. But as long as I'm talking, I will continue, because there are a few things I love more than the sound of my own voice, especially because I'm just getting over a cold and it's very like sexy and serial killery right now.
Oh
yeah,
my
thank
God.
you. And I think there's several ways that I challenge it. One is sort of approaching it with decolonization in mind. My first book takes place in Iran. Oh my gosh, I forgot to say, by the way, I wrote Darius the Great is Not Okay and Darius the Great Deserves Better and Kiss and Tell. I was busy futzing with my microphone and forgot to introduce myself. So my first book takes place in Iran, where there's different like rules of homosocial interaction. So basically decentering whiteness is one way that I challenge or expand notions of masculinity. I also think as a writer, our job is to kind of balance showing the world as it is with the world as it can be. And so I sometimes take it upon myself to show boys acting in ways that I wish boys had acted when I was a teenager. For instance, in my second book, Darius the Great Deserves Better, his soccer team has a moment before every game where they get in a circle and are deliberately say something nice to each other. And they have to hold, their coach makes them hold hands and say nice things to each other. And I was like, yeah, maybe athletes would be a little less toxic if they all had to be nice to each other before a game. Which I'm not saying Ted Lasso stole my idea, but I'm not saying it either. So if they want to give me some royalties, that's fine. And I think, as much as we push, as queer men, we are still sort of on the outskirts of what is considered traditional masculinity. And therefore, just by existing in writing, we're constantly challenging it, no matter what we do. And a lot of people find that discomforting, and a lot of, Florida governors who eat pudding with their fingers find us alarming and try to ban us, and we just keep doing what we're doing.
Texas governors too.
Yeah, but he's not as easy to make fun of. He's just horrible.
Yeah.
But he doesn't eat pudding with his fingers or eat fingers with his pudding. Whatever he did, I missed it. Okay. I was not paying attention.
I will say though, I have made out with a guy in front of Greg Abbott's house here in Austin. So that was my little
nice. Well done, Sister Suffragette.
I'm putting in the work. So I think to answer this question, the book is about Kike, and he's exploring romantic options with boys. But I think for this question, I think with expanding masculinity, it really came down to his relationships with boys and men who were not his romantic interests. So I was trying really hard with, he has a sort of a 1 year older mentor named Arturo. And that was actually added after my draft. I got a note from my agent's assistant to explore maybe if Kike could be with a guy who he wasn't attracted to. And I was like, novel concept. So he has this this friend and mentor, and I wanted that to be like really supportive and, you know, fun, and but without like the romantic aspect of it. And then with Kike's dad, like I wanted to explore like a straight guy who wants to do his best but just doesn't know how, so he is making mistakes, but he's also just coming at it with love and like sort of the right attitude, like that Fresh Prince gif. It's like he's a little confused, but he's got the right attitude. Like I wanted that for his father. And then Kike sort of has another mentor who's an older man, and that's Mr. Chasman, who's a teacher. And like that comes from, I love the trope of YA books, like the queer kid going to his English teacher and like getting guidance from him. So I wanted to just like sort of like do that and then like make it a little more chaotic. But yeah, like I was trying with those relationships specifically, I think, to talk about how in a non-romantic context you can be there for someone and you can support them, and you know, even if you're straight like Kike's dad, it can be a really positive thing.
What I want to know is where everyone is getting these English teachers, because all of mine were like 70-year-old women.
Yeah.
Who were probably voting for George W. Bush.
Yeah. But it's fiction.
Exactly.
Yeah, but where did the trope come from? Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off, Julian. It just
no, you're fine. I'm no, because now you have me thinking too, because I don't think I had good English teachers in that they were supportive of me as a student, but I couldn't say like they were like mentors. So now I am thinking, where did that trope? It's got to be a movie.
It's probably the coastal elites.
I feel like it's Dead Poet Society or something. I don't know.
Yes. Oh, it is Robin Williams. You're right.
There we go. Okay. So yeah, I take with As You Walk On By, I kind of took that similar approach that Adib was talking about, in that I want to show the world as it is, which I do through the character of Theo's best friend, Theo, the main character's best friend, Jay, who is not the best of representation. Yes, he's horrible.
An a-hole.
Just a tiny bit. But yeah, I want to show it through him how, you know, we can have these people in our lives who say they're supportive, say they're great and whatnot, but fall into that traditional straight masculinity of I can't be seen too much of this because then people think this of me. And so I try to show that part of the world through that, but I also try to show, you know, a more supportive kind of masculinity through Darren, Theo's other best friend, and how it can be, how we can have somebody who just wants to hug you when great things happen and, you know, just, you know, uplift you, and it doesn't fall into those toxic masculinity kind of tropes. So I did that, and I also did it through Theo's dad, who is bisexual. And I wanted to show that. I wanted to show a queer parent who is very, you know, very strong in that sense, but also, you know, does nothing but want to, you know, hug Theo and let him cry on his shoulder and things like that. And it's supportive of him crying and showing emotion and whatnot. So that's what I definitely try to show. And I try to challenge the different stereotypes put around masculinity through my writing, but just fully agree that, you know, just us being queer male writers, I feel like that's what all we're doing is challenging, you know, these things that we're told of how we're supposed to be through our writing.
Again, not really much I can say. Those are amazing answers. So
yes, you shouldn't have let us prepare.
That wasn't my idea.
Okay. Craig loves chaos.
Right, you were sabotaged.
I do. I mean, yeah, I love chaos. I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not. Anyway, so many young people, not just queer people, but a lot of young people experience some sort of conflict with the concept of masculinity during their teens. Would you say your books provide some sort of like guidance for these people?
I mean, I hope so, but like only at the end, because like I mentioned, Kike is like a chaotic person who does what I call brave, but are actually like pretty reckless things. So I hope like at the end of the book, like they have someone to be like, oh, okay. Because spoiler alert, like the message of my book is like to share yourself, like all sides of yourself with the people in your life so that they can know you fully and support you in the way that you need. And like to, because for me, I think I do compartmentalize myself into like what's digestible for certain people in my life. And so with Kike, like I didn't want him to do that. And then hopefully like a teen who reads this would be like, oh, like I can be more open about, this thing that I don't talk to anyone about. And that's especially like really important with mental health stuff. So many people stay quiet and don't get the support they need because, they're too ashamed to talk about it. And so, yeah, I would hope that he's a model, but not in every way. Again, like it's more like do what I say, not what I do sort of thing with Kike. So that's my answer. But I do have to very quickly, because he's probably going to come up, I have to introduce, this is Echo. He's my new cat. This is his panel debut, but he will, I'm sure, be in a lot more. And so that's what I like. If I'm focusing down here, it's because he's biting me. But yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I hope that readers look at it as a guide and not a rule book, because no one book, no one character fits all. So I hope that they look at Theo's journey from beginning to the end. I feel like because he does definitely go on a journey in, confronting a lot of things inside of himself, a lot of biases, a lot of, things that he grew up thinking this is how I should be versus this is how I can be. So yeah, I definitely hope that readers pick it up and see it as a guide, as a, okay, these are things that you can look at and things that you can consider. I don't want anyone to ever feel like this is what you have to do in order to exist in this world. We all have to find our own paths. We all have different ways of going on our journeys. But yeah, I think especially with Theo, because he's probably the messiest character I've ever written, that yeah, I hope that people pick it up and say, you know what, I can actually make mistakes and grow from them, and do better and own my mistakes and not just, apologize, just hoping someone will forgive me and never, actually acknowledge what I've done to them.
I think, when we look at sort of the concept of masculinity, especially when it comes to young people, they're going through a phase of their lives when they're really having to define it for themselves and have it defined for them by their peers. And so often it's something that is exclusionary, that if you don't meet certain criteria, you're ejected from it. You can have your man card revoked or you're being a girl. And I think there's something really powerful in writing books that include behaviors that young people are being told day to day disqualifies them from masculinity. And yet on the page we show, no, it's not disqualifying. In fact, masculinity is simply one facet of your identity, and you get to be a whole person and decide for yourself who you are and how you can be. And no one can really stop you.
Great. No, wait, that actually, I love how this is just going deeper and deeper into every question. Because the next one is, what advice or insight do you have to offer to young queer people who may have navigating the path of masculinity right now?
Don't try to grow a beard until you're absolutely certain which parts grow. Don't try to debut it before it's ready, is all I'm saying. Number one piece of advice. Just don't. Your friends are going to smile to your face, and then they're going to make fun of you behind your back, and they're still going to love you very fiercely, and they will punch anyone who insults you. But they will love you too much to tell you that your beard looks bad. On a more serious note. No, I see everyone knows that feeling of like, why didn't someone tell me it looked bad?
Why are you calling me out?
No, we all finally, like, we all have that one friend who will tell us. And so you eventually learn, like, this is the one friend that's like, how does my facial hair look today? And they will give you the truth. As far as advice, I feel like it's really easy as an adult from living in a position of relative safety to try and look back on teen years and give any advice that doesn't feel a little bit trite. But I think finding safe people to be around is really powerful. I think rejecting hatred wherever you can. I think cultivating your relationships with people that make you feel good for being who you are, instead of people that try to mold you into who they think you should be, is crucial. And at the end of the day, I always tell young people, um, high school does thankfully eventually end. Your teen years eventually end. And as you grow, life really does only get better. Like your knees might get worse, but life itself does keep getting better.
And you're back.
Yes. Actually, knock on wood, back fine, knees, disaster.
I'm the opposite.
Hairline, gone, obviously. That happened when I was like 22, though, so.
Wig. Adib touched on something that I was thinking about, which is like safety. And I just know, like, where I grew up, it would not have been very safe for me to be like out. And, even if I had sort of known who I was at that point, like, I don't think I would have come out and been very like so vocal about who I was and everything. And I think a lot of the messaging we see in media is like, you can't be your true authentic self unless you've told everyone you've ever met that, like, who you want to sleep with. And it just, it was really empowering to come out. I am glad that I don't have to like pretend anything anymore in that respect. But I just think, like, being a teen, I'm just like, you can be your full authentic self. It's the world that doesn't allow you to, do everything you want, but it's like, there's no obligation to do that and to put yourself in harm's way, because until you're like 18, it's like you don't even have full agency over your body, and you're just a lot of your decisions. So like I think my main advice is like, there shouldn't be no guilt involved with protecting yourself when you are a queer person. And that's what I was thinking.
I'm gonna 100% agree that your safety is paramount. Knowing the people that you can trust, finding your community, which, like, I didn't get my community until I was in my mid-20s. But just know that they will be there. And then when you do find them, you will feel a whole lot more fulfilled being your most authentic self. But until then, yeah, safety is paramount. But while doing that, do not be afraid to define what masculinity is to yourself. Don't be afraid to define who you want to be to yourself. Not everyone has to know. It doesn't have to be any formal announcement of the things that you feel, the things that you know to be true to you. But I do feel it's important to acknowledge those things to yourself, because that helps you so much throughout this life, is having the confidence in who you are, despite what the world tries to tell you you're supposed to be.
I mean, yeah, again, solid advice. I couldn't have said better. Have any of you received any feedback from your readers about the impact that your book had on them, about understanding their identity or masculinity at all?
Yeah, I get a lot of messages, especially about As You Walk On By, about the conversations that Theo has with another character named Luca, and the things that they talk about when it comes to family, when it comes to identity, when it comes to how they get to represent themselves in their high school or whatnot. I do get a lot of messages, thanking me, because it's not often that you get to see that portrayed, especially when it's, from a person of color's view. So yeah, it's been nothing but positivity in any of my books, but especially this one when it comes to talking about things, when it comes to identity and masculinity, and just finding that fine line of who you want to be versus who the world expects you to be. So yeah.
It's weird. I think when I think back on the interactions I've had with readers and the conversations I've had, almost all of them have had more to do either with mental health, which is a pretty significant aspect of Darius's character and story, or sort of the immigrant and diaspora experience. And as I think back on it, almost always if there are like questions or feedback about my examination of masculinity, it's almost always uh, in how it intersects with being a child of immigrants, being part of diaspora, and like the culture clash and the definition of masculinity that comes across. But I would say, that feedback has generally been positive, and like I've generally had really good conversations. I always feel a little weird, like talking about readers when they're not around. If that makes any sense. Like, especially, we write for
Hate them
teens,
all.
and you have like you do school visits or whatever. You have like, kids are very frank sometimes too frank, and you have to be like, listen, I know you're frank, but you have to have a boundary with me because I'm an adult and you've just met me, and you shouldn't be saying those things to me for your own safety. And so, there have been conversations I had that like left me thinking a lot, but I usually don't repeat them to people just to sort of respect that reader's privacy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I haven't gone. I don't know if I've heard from one teenager, but it wasn't about the book. It was the fact that their parent like saw that they were reading my book and took it away, which is very sad. But yeah, I don't hear from a lot of teens, but a lot of grown men have DM'd me and just said, like the theme that sort of runs through all of them is sort of like, I read this, I wish I had it as a teen, but it still healed something in me as an adult. And I think, yeah, I'm sure you guys have heard that all the time too. And so I don't think it's really, I mean, I'm sure it is in terms of masculinity, but I think with queerness, it's like, not so many of us were not able to be like out and proud and pursuing things in high school while watching our peers sort of pair off and like have all these milestone moments that you see in TV and TV shows and movies. And so I think like a lot of like queer YA, it's like us being a little bit like doing wish fulfillment, like, oh, I wish I'd figured out this lesson 4 years before it, or 10 years before it happened in real life, because I couldn't explore that until I was older. But yeah, so a lot of them are like, wish I had this as a kid. And I'm like, me too.
I feel that. I really do. So this next question is for Julian specifically. So I know that in all your books, you talk a lot about Black queer boy joy, which is something that is very important. But why is that such an important aspect for you?
This is such a. Why can I get a nice, easy question?
Julian, what's your favorite color?
Thank you, right?
Is it purple? Because
No. Fascinating enough, purple is probably like on the lower part of the spectrum for me when it comes to favorite color. Why do I love? I know that the reason I put so much emphasis on queer Black boy joy, just queer Black joy in general, is because growing up, I was made to read the classics, and majority of the classics, if they did feature a Black or queer or Black and queer person, their storyline was fully focused on pain, trauma, and then they always died. And that did not give me a positive outlook as a teen. It did not give me a hopeful outlook as a teen either. So I put so much emphasis on that because, that's not even just the classics. It's the TV shows, it's the movies, it's everything I saw growing up. Those were the Black storylines. Those were the queer storylines. And it just put me in such a bad place that I promised myself I would not give the next generation that kind of outlook on their lives. And so that's why it's important for me to tell these stories, because as I grew older, I realized, oh, wait, we do get to be the main character. We get to be the hero. We get to fall on our faces and fall in love. We get to do all the other things that I saw non-Black people getting to do. But it's not talked about as much as our pain and our trauma and everything else, which is still important. I think, talking about those things, talking about history and how history continuously repeats itself is super important. But it's also important to show that we deserve joy. It's not something that has to be earned. It's not something I have to do in order to say, oh, Julian gets his happy ending. No, I get that from jump, just like everyone else does. And so that's why I put so much emphasis on queer Black joy, is because I want readers, I want people to realize that our storyline, our lives are not fully focused on the trauma and the pain and the suffering and the death that we're continuously shown throughout media.
Preach.
May I jump on and say something, even though the question was not? May I speak as if the question was addressed to me?
Sure, go ahead.
Every time I see a white queer author saying that queer joy is over and we're writing queer rage now, or queer joy is oversaturated, I am reminded that no matter what white people say about queer solidarity, whiteness always trumps all. And so I'm glad that, Julian, you're still writing queer Black boy joy, because despite what white people say, we don't have enough of it yet.
Facts. No, honestly, I could go into about how much I love Julian's books because of that specific reason, but I won't, because we only have so much time. So the next question is for Adib, actually.
No, keep talking about Julian.
No, you know what's coming. So I remember reading Darius the Great for the first time. There was a particular scene about circumcision that was honestly pretty funny. I was cracking up in my living room. I don't know if that was the intention or not, but it was hilarious. What made you decide to keep that in there?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely the intent that people would have a really uncomfortable chuckle about it. I think sometimes as a writer, our job is to do the meanest thing we can think of to our characters. And I think for a teen boy with a lot of body image issues, who gets made fun of a lot and deals with a lot of unfortunate nicknames in his school in America, going overseas and being made fun of for his penis was probably one of the most humiliating things that could possibly happen to him. And no one stopped me. And I think, more broadly, the reason I picked that as, a particularly humiliating thing for him is because, like, when you're a teenager, you're really sort of redefining your relationship to your own body. If you're a person with a penis, when you're a child, it's like, it's there to pee, it's like potty humor, it's like whatever, but it's a private part and no one talks about it. And suddenly you go to like middle school or high school and everyone is talking about their wieners. Like, it's suddenly like, sometimes a source of, desire or arousal, or a source of competition, sometimes a source of violence. And like, I don't know, anyone in the audience who has this body part knows that, especially when you're a teenager, it like has a mind of its own. And I think, showing Darius grappling with that is, I think, part of my sort of broader interest in showing like what it means to live in a human body and what it means to have ownership over it. I think something I didn't realize I was interested in, but realized the more I wrote, is that I'm really concerned and interested in questions of how young people like form their boundaries and how we define consent for ourselves. And I think part of being comfortable with the idea of consent is being really comfortable with your own body. And so, oh my gosh, I've gone completely off topic. All of which to say, I kept that scene in of Darius having a really uncomfortable body moment because it was important to me to show him living in a body. And even though he's really embarrassed and like, goes home and cries, at the end of the day, he's also like, you know what, this is my body. Like, it's normal to have a body and I'm fine with that. I just wish people hadn't made fun of me for it. And I think that was important to show too. Also, it is like really funny.
No, I remember.
Also, why was I the only person that was asked to talk about wieners for this panel?
Because out of all the books from this panel, yours the only one who actually mentions it, like, head on. It was a whole thing.
You did not just say that.
But am I wrong?
But see, that is why also I love the scene. It is humorous, but it is something that is lacking, I feel, a lot in YA with male protagonists, or with boy protagonists, is that discussion. Like you said, it is something that comes up a lot in high school in those teen years, but it's not talked about. And I like that moment for me was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad someone's talking about this because I remember exactly what that, what that's like going through high school. So yeah, perfect question, Greg. I loved it.
Well, I'm going to segue and say, like, the first time I read This Is Why They Hate Us, and the first time they mentioned Tyler, the Bulge, I immediately was like flashing back to high school and like, yeah, there was that one guy that everyone talked about like that.
And yeah, straight guys too. Like straight guys would be talking about.
Oh yeah, no, straight guys definitely like, yeah, that guy's hung like a horse.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do you know that? Like, I was deeply closeted. I'm like, how do these guys know this about each other?
I know. And I was like, oh, when they're not pretending, like when they don't have to pretend not to care, I'm like, okay, then they're straight. Like there was this weird thing where it's like straight guys are actually more interested in talking about that. But anyway.
Oh my God. I mean, from personal experience, yeah. There was more talk about other wieners by other guys in the locker room than from myself. So, you know what? That's not my problem. And we're out of high school, thankfully.
Yeah, not my circus, not my monkeys.
Yeah.
Precisely. Okay, so Aaron, you and your book are very proudly bisexual. Even the cover resembles the bisexual flag. And like, yeah, you've talked about that. Can you talk about the intersectionality of masculinity and bisexuality in your writing?
Yeah, I think so. There are a lot of gay stereotypes. I think there are a lot fewer bi stereotypes, but one of them is, and I agree, we're very loud and annoying when we are out. And I think that's become a necessity because in multiple ways we're erased, right? So when people are talking about, like they'll say gay when they mean queer, they mean like more of an umbrella, community thing. And so like we're erased from that. But also like when people are talking about straight people and they're talking about, oh, like this guy's with a woman, or guys who like, they don't say guys who like women, they say straight men do this, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, there are men who are queer who are with women. And so like, because of that erasure, like you become really loud and like you have to be like constantly reminding people. And I am, as I get older and older, I'm sort of less loud just because I'm sort of realizing like first of all, I can't tell everyone, like it's too exhausting to tell everyone that I'm bi. And then it's also, I can't control whether they believe me or not. So I'm trying to sort of just let it go and be like, they're a stranger, it doesn't matter, or they are in your life, but it's just it's not on you to help them. Like, so I have been trying to become more chill about that, but I'm also like proud. And I'm also thinking about how I was so confused. Like once I found out I was bi, I was not confused. But before that, it was very confusing because it was like, again, like there were two ways I could have gone and both of them would have felt dishonest to me. I was talking about this with a friend some time ago, but I remember like being on a bus, and these guys were talking about their crushes, and like, they're like, oh, like who do you want to smash, whatever. And at one point I was like Beyonce because it's Beyonce. But then I was like, it felt disingenuous saying that, but it wasn't that I didn't find Beyonce very attractive. Of course, who wouldn't? But it was because there was another answer that I couldn't say. And without saying like both of them, it felt dishonest. And so I remember that experience as a teen. And so like I wrote this book for 17-year-old me, but I think there are a lot of kids who are similar to 17-year-old me who can pick up this book and realize some stuff about themselves. And I also just wanted to like, again, like there are a few bi stereotypes, but when there's one and it fits me, I'm like overjoyed. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna like embrace this. So like one of them, and it's really dumb, it's like there's like bi finger guns, and like I made it a point, it's so dumb, but like I made it a point to put it in the book because I wanted that representation, like this tiny little thing. And so there's just moments like that where I'm like, okay, I'm making kind of, it feels like making bisexuality canon, even though there are, of course, like a lot of bisexual works, and I've read all of them and seen all of them. But yeah, it also, I could talk about this for a very long time, but I feel like it's been too long now. But I'll just say this last thing where it intersects, I think, bisexuality, masculinity necessarily intersects with misogyny and sexism, because like I again, in the past, like when I'm wanting to prove to people that I'm actually like interested in women, it would veer very quickly towards like objectification and, you know, trying to get the approval of a lot of, you know, straight guys who are kind of like, and you know, it hinges on their sort of fragile understanding of their sexuality, where they think like if you are attracted to a man, your attraction to women would go away. But I found myself trying to perform that, and I just I hope we can all, as bi men, like we can move to a place where it's like women aren't caught in the crossfire when we're trying to, you know, validate our own sexuality.
I think that's a great answer.
It's a lot.
Are we allowed to swear? Because I feel like moving on. No, I think we have about like 5 more minutes left. If anyone has any questions they want to just throw in there really quickly. Doesn't even have to be from the audience. It could be from any of you as well.
Well, I'm just curious, like, what are you guys working on next?
The classic author question.
Yeah.
It's like asking a college student, what's your major?
Yeah.
Please don't.
For me, I have my next YA coming out in the spring of 2024. It's called The Breakup Lists. It's about a high school student who accidentally falls in love with his sister's ex-boyfriend, and chaos ensues. In the summer, I have another picture book called Bijan Always Wins, about a little boy who makes everything into a competition and alienates all his friends. And then in the fall, I have my first adult romance, which the title is to be determined, but it's about millennials boning and drinking wine. And I'm really excited for it. And there's no surprise, but it's adult romance, so there's lots of wieners in it.
Circumcised, uncircumcised.
Actually, I guess it's just really the two, but they're mentioned multiple times.
Okay, good. I knew a guy who was kind of halfway, but anyway, Julian, what are you working on?
I'm working on not having a heart attack laughing at y'all. What do I have coming out next? My next YA is, fingers crossed, everyone. Coming out summer of 2024. It's called Prince of the Palisades. Thank you, Adib and Lana Wood Johnson, for helping me create that title. But it's called Prince of the Palisades. It is Netflix's Young Royals meets a YA Red, White, and Royal Blue, where the prince of a made-up country, because hey, we write fiction so we could do stuff like that, goes viral for trash talking his country's prime minister and ruining his family's reputation. And in order to kind of clean up his image, he decides that he's going to head over to America, where his mother is originally from, and do a whole bunch of PR work to try to salvage the things that he's ruined. And in the process, he ends up falling for a very not so royal American boy, and it gets even more disastrous from there.
Oh my God. All the books you guys talked about, I'm very excited for, which is no surprise to me. But I am trying to follow Adib into adult romance. It's been written. I'm probably going to send it back to my agent on Monday, hopefully. I'm going to try and spend the weekend working on it because I have her notes. And then hopefully a second YA. We shall see. That one would be about high school journalism and not at all about really kissing or boys, but subtly about that, but mostly about newspaper stuff. Yeah.
Just love how we as authors get to say, and I'm going to be spending my weekend working on this. Like, where are our days off? Where are our holidays?
No, I am legit. This is the only work I'm doing today. I'm on vacation, and I agreed to do this before I planned my vacation. I was like, whatever, I can do a Zoom panel on vacation, which is why I'm doing it in front of a blank wall in my aunt's house.
It's just
as everyone's downstairs cooking, and it smells really, really good.
Well, I mean, good news is that the panel's pretty much over, so you can go eat soon. Bad news is panels are over.
Oh,
sorry.
That's fair. I'm gonna miss you all.
Yeah, thanks, guys. We had a question in the chat, so I'm just gonna say this very quickly.
Ooh.
What's challenging about going back to being a teenager? The slang. They keep coming up with
my
new
gosh.
slang.
Oh my gosh.
I think it's sometimes for me, it's really hard to remember how many firsts you're experiencing, like just how much knowledge it's like your first time finding out about something. And sometimes I, as an adult, I'm like, well, of course I know that X, Y, and Z. And they're like, no, they don't. They've never experienced that before. They don't know what a floppy disk looks like. They just think you've 3D printed a save icon.
Yeah.
And I was actually violently reminded of how every human being is constantly learning new things. When like 2 months ago, my sister came up to me and was like, Adib, watch, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And someone on Reddit had reposted Tom Holland's lip sync battle. And somehow she had made it 6 years without ever seeing it. And I was like, you reposted it, right? That's what you have to do every time it comes up. What do you mean every time it comes up? And I'm like, it's 6 years old. I've seen it 100 times. And I still stopped to watch the whole thing, obviously. And she was like, how have I never seen it before? And I'm like, I don't know. Humans are constantly learning new things. And so especially when you're a teenager, like remembering that information is new, experiences are new, can be really, really challenging for me.
I am going to agree with both. It is 100% the way we talk changes constantly, and how we communicate things. So that, and also that, it is remembering that as an adult, I've experienced so many different things that teens haven't yet, that I need to remember how important it is to kind of like spend time in those first moments, and not just glaze over them like, oh yeah, every teen knows how to handle this situation or deal with this, when that's so far from the truth. So yeah, I agree with both.
Okay. We actually do need to wrap it up because we're at overtime. But thank you guys so much. This was honestly the best part of my day. It was hilarious. It was great seeing y'all again.
Yes.
And I want to shout out to everyone.
You too. Thank you for moderating.
Thank you so much, Greg, for moderating.
No problem. I mean, I'm just glad I wasn't at 3 a.m. this time.
There's always next year. Don't worry.
The things I do for like the bookish community do not know no time. It's like sleep, don't know her. But we're moving on. Anyways, again, thank you all so much.
Yes, and thank you for everyone for joining the
thank you everyone in the
inaugural
audience.
festival.
Thank you to the fabulous organizers of QPOC Fest. This is like the best event of the year.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.